everyone, and welcome back to Conversations with Agents of Change. I'm Izchel Boyd, a community builder and storyteller passionate about amplifying the people who are reshaping our world through innovation, impact, and bold ideas. On this podcast, we explore the real journeys behind change and challenges, the courage, the ripple effects that transform communities and industries. If you believe that business can be a force for good and that one voice can spark a movement, you are in the right place. Today's guest is absolutely one of those voices. I'm joined by Siobhan Kearney, facilitator, consultant, and founder of Menopause and I, an organization dedicated to transforming how workplaces understand and support menopause through training, education, and policy conversations. She's pushing an issue that affects nearly half of the population into the strategic business conversation, one that is still largely missing from Northern Ireland's employment rights debate. Siobhan, welcome to Conversation with Agents of Change. I'm so glad to have you here.
And I'm so delighted to be here. And Agents of Change, absolutely love it. And we're all part of it, aren't we, Izzy?
I hope so. I hope that most people believe that we all are doing a little bit from our own side. To begin, for listeners who might not know you personally yet, who is Siobhan beyond the bio? What do your friends say you're known for?
Oh my goodness, what an interesting question. So I would say beyond the workplace, beyond the bio, beyond the important work that I do, I would say my friends and family would say that I am the anchor,
Mhm.
that I am the go-to, that I am the person that gets the phone call, the person that gets a message. Can you do this? Can you do that? And I suppose it's in my nature just to be helpful. And it's built in and it has been for many, many years. And you know what? It gives me a real sense of identity and a sense of purpose to
Absolutely.
support those who come to me with a small problem, a big problem, whatever it is. It really doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what time of day, might matter what time of night. But
Wow.
otherwise, do you know what? I suppose that's really intertwined with how I see myself.
Absolutely. And I suppose that is, as you said, part of who you are and how you choose to do what you do. So before we get into that, I want to go back to the beginning. What was the moment when menopause shift from being a topic to becoming your mission?
I can tell you exactly when that happened. It happened 9 years ago. It happened 9 years ago because I was in perimenopause and did not understand what was happening to me. So I had been working in a full-time job as chief executive of a mental health charity. And as I noticed real shifts and real changes to my emotional health, to my mental health, to my self-belief, to my identity. And I was going to work every single day. I was putting a face on, putting a mask on. Everything was okay. But inside, I was literally crumbling. I was more, I suppose, that inner rage that was so inner that it didn't come out because professionally, you can't be sitting in your office and people coming in to say hi with a cup of coffee and you saying, "Get out of my office. I do not want to see you today." And then I ended up leaving my job very nearly on a whim. I just walked out one day and said, "I can't do this anymore." And it was literally about 8 months later that I realized I was in menopause. And the reason I realized that is because my period started to change.
Mm.
And I looked back and went, oh my goodness, had I have known what was going on with me, I certainly wouldn't have left my job. I would have put measures in place for me. I would have put measures in place to support other women in the organization. And then I came to the enlightenment, I suppose, that if I experienced that at 45 years of age, there were thousands and thousands of other women sitting in workplaces experiencing the same crumbling confidence, loss of identity, imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? And that really
Absolutely.
was the spark of inspiration where I said, there's nobody talking about this. Somebody needs to, and I'm going to do it. And I did.
I am so proud of that because it's not just like knowing your own journey, but taking action and say, okay, I'm just not going to say, all right, okay, I understand why it happens to me. Well, hell, it's
Mhm.
more like, okay, so what do I do with this information and how do I help others? So I love that energy. And I think it's part of why you founded Menopause and I to bring education and workshops and training into the workplaces. And I think it's filling a very critical gap. What did you see happening or not happening that made you think, right, this needs to exist and I'm going to build it?
Well, when I did what I call an environmental scan at the time, when I started to have conversations, there was literally tumbleweed blowing around rooms the minute I mentioned the word menopause. Now, I was speaking to professional women, and they were very, very encouraging, I have to say, because they recognized that this was a massive gap. Now, I also understand that we as women are only now confidently speaking about menopause.
Yeah.
And the lag between women sitting in their homes with their friends or family using the word menopause, talking about experiences of menopause, there is going to be a lag when business thinks, right, okay, this is now a workplace consideration. All we have to do is look at the demographic of our own staff. We have to look at some of the legislation, really important legislation that has come in England in the Employment Rights Bill. So I just thought, you know what, let's approach this pragmatically, because I am not out to hammer businesses and saying you must do.
Yeah.
But also there's that aspect of what is good practice and what good practice looks like. And it's not about that nice thing to do for our female staff. In actual fact, it is a necessity to retain those highly experienced female members of the team, those women who have corporate memory, who are bringing years of skills, years of knowledge, years of experience to their role. And there are statistics out there that say that 1 in 10 women have left the workplace due to menopausal symptoms. And I'm thinking, did they leave because of the symptoms, or did they leave because organizations don't understand? So, my approach is to improve understanding, number one. The second is to improve skills. How do we have these conversations? How do we support staff? What do workplace adjustments look like within our particular environment? Because it is not a one size fits all. I mean, my personal experience of menopause is not the same as my friends, my
Yeah.
sisters. And so I suppose it is taking that really grounded approach. I'm not out to make companies or businesses feel bad. I'm not out to put pressure on them. I'm out to say, listen, this is an opportunity for you now to retain top talent, to actually put sometimes really simple measures in place as this does not have to cost a fortune. Actually, it is speaking to your female staff, finding out what their needs are, training your managers, and awareness on how to have conversations and what reasonable adjustments or workplace adjustments look like, and awareness in staff teams. So as the language around menopause change, and then the culture shift starts to really emerge. And I think as an approach, it is sensible, logical, and it has been working for me over the last 7 years.
That's brilliant. And I think it's very, very relevant because when you are growing up as a child, you get the opportunity to learn about your first period and your menstruation and how to deal with that and how to understand that you're becoming a teen and then a young woman. But then I think there's a big gap when you are just after giving birth and like motherhood and but what happens after?
I
Whether
know.
you were a mom or not, like what happens after? There's that massive gap, not just at work, but in life. I've started just now to look at workshops and talks about menopause, and it's very timely because I'm turning 44, and so
Mhm.
to me that's starting to become a more interesting topic given my age. But I don't think my mom had experienced any of that knowledge or education, and I'm wondering if we are doing enough to help young women to understand that because I suppose it's quite shocking. Menopause is as shocking as, your period, puberty.
Oh,
Your body changes that in every single way. So I wonder if what we're doing like in the society and schools is enough or what could be doing more.
we could certainly be doing more, because you're absolutely correct. In biology at school, we learned about the periods and the reproductive system, but there was never a mention of menopause. And I know in the curriculum now, there's still no mention of menopause. And it is part of a woman's life. You know, for most women, it is a natural transition. And I'm one of those women who went through a natural transition. There's very little talk about surgical menopause, medical menopause. And so those women who are approaching menopause or maybe have gone through an earlier premature menopause, they don't understand what's happening. And I think the education aspect of it is absolutely critical. We should not enter a stage of our lives without understanding or knowing what to expect and putting measures in place to support ourselves as we make this transition. I mean, I have the benefit of hindsight. I'm now 54 years of age. And if I were to look back into my 30s, late 30s, I'd be thinking, right, okay, Siobhan, what can you do to understand the menopause transition? think about these stages. I mean, the number of women who still don't even have the terminology around menopause. When I'm out delivering workshops shops in community-based settings, even the word perimenopause is like, what? Never heard the word in my life before. And yet that's the stage of menopause when the symptoms begin. So there's a real education needed. And there's lots of really good work going on, I have to say. The very fact celebrities are now talking about menopause nearly gives us permission. And I know we don't technically need permission, but it's somebody else talking about it openly on television, Davina McCall's programs, celebrities talking about their experience, thinking they had dementia, whereas it was menopause. All of these things actually lead us to having a wider conversation. That's not to say there's not still gaps. I would love to see it on the curriculum. I don't mean it has to take over the curriculum, but just mention of menopause, that women in their 20s and 30s are actually aware that they will go into it at some stage and some age in their lives, and just to normalize.
Yeah.
Reduce the stigma, reduce the taboo. I know it's a bodily function, a biological function in a woman's life, but hey, so is childbirth, so are periods, and yet there's some great work being done around that. I'm very hopeful, though, I have to say, that I didn't expect this because I started to talk about menopause openly, professionally, set a business up to deliver awareness raising sessions on menopause. I really didn't expect everybody to go, right, we got it. Menopause is done and dusted. We don't have to talk about it anymore. There's no awareness reason needed anymore. No, actually, it is an ongoing process because I look at my nieces. I don't have any children of my own, but I look at my nieces. I look at my nephews who are married, who are getting married, who will get married. And I think, well, they need to know.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, when I sit around my mother's kitchen table with the wide variety of family members from time to time, and I talk about menopause, and my nephews in particular were like, oh, please stop talking about menopause. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
because we all need to know. And so it's normal. It's an event that happens in a woman's life. And honestly, the more we know about the stages, symptoms, the impacts, what to look out for, especially in perimenopause, I think the better the experience we're going to have.
Absolutely. And we all experience that directly or indirectly, being a family member, a friend, a partner, or children of, So I think it's very interesting, and I love the way you're just saying that it's not just a health issue, quote unquote, but it's an economic, workforce, a strategic issue. And
It's
I would like you to unpack a little bit of that for our listeners. Why is framing so important for leaders?
Well, do you know what? Because it has not been seen as a priority up to now.
Yeah.
But there's something there, when you notice shifts in conversations.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I be in businesses and I'm noticing a shift in the conversation when I'm delivering awareness workshops to leaders, right? So I have a 1 hour workshop really focused on what is your responsibility when it comes to managing menopause in the workplace? Where are the strategic risks for you as a business, which includes organizational risks? So if you have 500 employees, 50% of them are female, 25% of them are in the typical menopausal age range between 45 and 55. And 1 in 10 of those female employees come into work one day and say, can't do it anymore. Well, that has an economic impact on your business. So, economically, it makes sense. It also makes sense in terms of the legal risk, which is now emerging when it comes to menopause in the workplace. Now, here in Northern Ireland, there is no particular legislation that mentions menopause explicitly, but it is covered in other legislation, age related legislation, disability legislation, gender-based legislation. So it is covered. And when I look at the statistics around, the number of tribunals that are being taken from workplaces, they have tripled in the last 3 years. Why have they tripled? Because maybe women are becoming more aware of what they're experiencing. Maybe they're looking at the types of things that are said to them, the types of adjustments that would help but are not available. And they're going like, do you know what? Not good enough.
Yeah.
Not good enough. So disability legislation, even the language you used around menopause, how to promote that within workplaces is a leadership responsibility. It has got to come from the top. So organizational risk, legal risk, operational risk, all of those things combined actually make menopause a very strategic, important part of the business agenda. because I know that, given the economic situation at the moment, businesses actually need to retain their staff. So that encouragement is there for leaders to understand better, to recognize, yep, we need to be doing something about this. And then you think about your managers or your supervisors or people managers. What do they need to know about menopause? They need to know about the stages in not much detail. They need to know about the impact that it can have on their employees. They need to know how to have conversations, how to open those conversations. They need to know what their policy said. If they don't have a policy, they need to be thinking about a policy. And they also need to have the confidence and competence to have conversations. And then there's a magic point as well as where you raise awareness within the staff team, both female and male. And that really is to encourage those who are experiencing menopause to have a proactive approach in their own lives. Because I always say there is no magic wand. I don't have it. I don't have fairy dust that I can spread around organizations. I can't hand over my magic wand to anybody else and say your menopause symptoms are all sorted. No, there's a pragmatic and proactive approach that women have to take to manage symptoms, whether that is through lifestyle changes, their nutrition, movement, protecting their mental health and well-being, treatment options, and that confidence to have conversations with their line manager.
Yeah.
So, where the line manager is trained and has awareness and knowledge and skills, and the member of staff has the sometimes bravery, confidence to have that conversation to say, this is what's happening without fear of judgment, without fear of impact on how their performance is being viewed. And there is a touch point where adjustments work really, really well. A lot of organizations and businesses here in Northern Ireland are either there or getting there.
Yeah.
There are many more who are not currently considering it, but I do think that there's a carrot and stick aspect to this. The carrot is you're doing the right thing. This is good practice for your business. Strategically, this makes sense. The stick says coming down the road is another jump and an increase in cases that are going to tribunal where menopause is the cause for a company being taken to tribunal. And we don't want that.
Absolutely not. That should be, those two parts should be a encouragement enough for organizations to create policies if they don't have any in place. And again, I think that is very important that what you mentioned about the staff communicating with each other, I think that part of normalizing it and say, well, this is happening to us women and that is happening to us men as direct or indirect relationship, because
Colleagues,
of
of
course
course.
the and I wonder, is there any misconception about menopause at the workplace that you wish you could retire forever? Because I'm thinking at some point, like in some organizations, people will have said, we don't want women in mothering age because we are afraid that they might, leave the organization to have children. It wasn't spoken, it
No,
wasn't written anywhere, but
no.
it was well known. So I'm guessing if there's something similar about menopause and if there's any other misconception that they're still there.
Well, I was up in a business in the Northwest earlier this week, and we were having exactly this conversation about the perception of women as they get older. She's done. She has nothing to add here. Please exit stage left. So there still is that misconception. And I'm not saying it's everywhere,
Yeah.
but at some places.
Yeah.
She's done, her life is over, her productive life is over. You know what? Why is she still here? Now, I'm not saying organizations say that out loud, but there is that misconception that women actually have nothing to give. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Talk to me when I turned 50, 51, 52, 53, 54. It's getting better and better and better.
Yeah.
I have the knowledge, I have the confidence, I have the skills, and I am bringing it everywhere I go. And it's exactly the same for women in the workplace. They have the confidence, knowledge, and skills, they're bringing it wherever they go. And I suppose the risk is if they are not welcome to bring it to you in your business, they will certainly bring it somewhere else because we are not done. We are just getting started.
Yeah, I was going to say that to me it feels like it's a stage in your life in which you can really focus on other things that maybe your body weren't letting you focus at the beginning because you were in a reproductive stage and you were thinking in a way that your body was saying, okay, no, your priorities are such and such. Whereas after that, it's like, right, okay, roll your sleeves and let's start writing, start being more entrepreneurial. Like when you see the statistics of women that are uh, so-called successful, or they are more satisfied with their own lives, it's because they have a journey, and
They have agency.
they have agency, and definitely they just go for it, and they just try to get things done, and I love that.
When I think about my journey through leaving the workplace, setting up my own business, I did that when I was in perimenopause. And I have to say, I am super proud of myself because menopause had a real impact on, number one, my cognitive function. It was sitting looking at the keyboard going, where are these letters? And normally I touch type and it was like, oh, writing an email and looking at it and reading it over and over and over again and overanalyzing and says, will that land right? Does it sound okay? Rather than just bang, send. And I lost a lot of confidence through that part of my menopause transition. But then as the emergence began, you see, and I love this message of hope because friends of mine at that time when I was having these real confidence questions, can you do this? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? People are going to be talking about you. People are going to be pointing and saying, what's she at now? Blah, 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 blah. And they say, you will emerge from this a different version of yourself, a stronger version of yourself. And for them, they loved that version. And now I have that version and I love it
Yeah.
because I have unshackled myself from society's expectations of me as a woman,
Yeah.
from that worry about what other people think about me. I literally, and I don't mean this in a rude way,
Yeah.
I can't afford to care because I only care about me.
Yeah.
And so there's a growth in confidence that comes post menopause. It takes a lot of work and it can take some support from colleagues, from friends, from medication, from your lifestyle changes, but it does come. And that is the beauty of the whole thing. So I can sit here today in my office in Corklanone and feel positive and productive and proactive in my own life.
I love that because sometimes whenever I felt like, what am I going to do when the messages when you saw TV, or like you would see that a 40-year-old woman was old. And then when I was growing up, and it's like, oh, rats, I'm 40 something now.
Uh-huh.
I started to feel old, but then it's like, well, actually, I don't. And I don't see myself ever feeling old. So I think it's about like what you were saying about the right networking, having the right people around you, and that applies at work as well. If you have people who make you believe that you have reached the top, then you will believe that. And I think that in your facilitation and in your consulting work, you are helping organizations to build more inclusive cultures, which I really applaud because I think it's very necessary. What does a truly menopause aware organization looks like in practice day to day?
Okay. So I just reflect on the work that I have done with organizations who get it. They get it. They come from whether it's personal experience of a HR director, whether it comes from an acute awareness of risk. So it looks like an organization where a woman can walk in any day of the week and say, I actually feel really low today. So please, would you just give me a wee bit of space, where there is open conversations, where a woman can ring into work and say, I didn't sleep last night because of my hot flushes, because of my anxiety, because of insomnia. I can't come into work today, rather than saying, I've got a sore throat, I can't come in. So, where there's an openness around menopause, where leaders believe in the importance of menopause education, awareness, and support in workplaces, where managers have these key skills, knowledge, and capability to have conversations and drive change, where staff have the ability and confidence to have conversations, whether it's among themselves or indeed, if they need support, to approach a manager or their HR team within an organization. And so, culture shift is the big driver for all of this. What I want is a culture where it feels as normal to speak about menopause as it does to speak about having had a cold. And that's it. And it is happening as we speak, but there is much, much more to be done. I mean, when I look at our colleagues in GB and think now the legislation around that, the Employment Rights Bill, which mandates menopause action plans from 2027 for businesses with over 500 members of staff, and they have to report on it. Well, Is that the carrot or is that the stick? Actually, that is recognizing within the whole Women's Health Action Plan, within the whole legislative framework of women's rights are enshrined, and that includes women who are in menopause. So I think that's really important. Here in Northern Ireland, there's some great work being done. I'm not going to diminish the number of organisations and businesses who are taking this seriously as a business. I was going to say opportunity. It's not an opportunity. We shouldn't be opportunistic around women who are in menopause, but they recognise that without those women in the age range between 40 and 60, let's just say,
Yeah.
they are going to suffer. But when I think about what I would love to see, and I do sometimes say in presentations, I do fantasize sometimes that in maybe 5 years' time, my job is done here. Nothing more to do. Everybody's talking about it. We've all got the confidence. We all know about it, but we are on a trajectory.
Yes, that's great. And I think that is very powerful what you say, because sometimes when you go to an organization for training or consulting, I'm assuming here, but I think you could see, right, okay, this culture is ready for this conversation. And sometimes you'll be like, I think that resistance coming.
Mhm.
So how do you deal with that resistance, even from the same staff that is needing that help?
Well, I suppose if it is leadership driven and this is what we do and this is how we do it, that is so helpful, Izzy, because what is they saying? Culture eats strategy for breakfast,
Yeah.
right? So the culture generally it's organization wide, but the tone is set from the leadership team, from the management team. And if there's resistance, there is always that opportunity to widen the conversation, to have conversations with the staff team to see what would make a difference to us. Now, I love it when I go into organizations and they've already had those conversations
That's great.
and they're already on the journey of making adjustments or, listing adjustments that are available within their environment. That makes my heart sing because they get it. For those organizations that aren't quite there yet, there is always that aspect of the legal risk associated with menopause and the growing um, aspect of that, where women are, open to this. They're wise to it. They're not looking for poor practice, but they're hoping for good practice. That when they say that I am experiencing A, B, and C symptoms associated with menopause, some of them can be very intimate, some of them can be very embarrassing, that the least that they expect is some form of conversation,
Yeah.
right? So I suppose if we can't have the culture there open to the conversation, actually we can widen people's view on what the possibilities are if that doesn't happen. And I don't like saying that because I don't want to be, putting any more pressure on businesses. But if you're open to have mental health awareness and workshops in business, mental health first aiders, all of the mental health say, well, menopause now is following that trajectory. And that's why I very clearly see it. So when I think about the process for organizations, certainly, yes, if you start with a policy, fantastic. And it's not I'm saying this from my perspective, and it's because I know a lot about menopause. It's not difficult to create a menopause policy. There are so many free versions out there, and all you have to do is tailor it to your organization. And then you look wider and you look at writer absence management policy or performance management policy or flexible working policy. How do we make sure that these are all integrated so when a member of staff can't come into work due to menopausal symptoms, it is not a big deal? They have said menopause, but we have a flexible working policy here which specifically mentions menopause. So then there's that feeling that people get of, right, okay, this is integrated. Menopause is being treated the same way as a broken leg or a broken arm. And that makes a massive, massive difference. Policies sometimes only become useful when they're needed.
Yeah.
So you don't want this to be the thing that is taken off the shelf and the dust is blown off it. And somebody's going through it and saying, right, okay, this is available, and this didn't happen for me. We don't want to get to that stage. So then the awareness raising comes in. And it doesn't have to be bringing someone like me in all the time. Oh my goodness, look at all of the resources out there. And that's what I really promote when I'm working with businesses. Look at the free stuff that is available, the excellent websites, the resources that are available free of charge, the encouragement, monthly, put something out about menopause. I know people tend to focus around World Menopause Day or October, World Menopause Month. My menopause just didn't happen in October. It happened every single month of the year.
Yeah.
So normalize it, put stuff out on the internet, talk about it, talk to your staff. Is this working for you? And it can happen. And there's still a bit of a fear around saying the wrong thing. And I think that's where a big problem lies. I'm afraid of saying anything in case I say the wrong thing. That's where the training really is very, very helpful. It guides you. I mean, the resources that I have to support that are second to none. And I'm not being boastful. I'm just saying that's how it is. And so, yes, Izzy, do you think in 5 years' time I'll be doing something else?
Well, I really hope not, because I really want us to keep working, not just maybe with organizations, but I don't see that as the tip of the arrow, but I think that is something that needs to continue. So the education around that is very important. So I would like to see a world in which this is openly talked about, and
Yes.
at different ages, at different,
Stages. Yeah,
at different
absolutely.
stages, so the young people understand now why their mommies are so cranky and stuff. No,
I know,
so
I
I think
know.
that it would be brilliant for all of us to keep seeing that. And I think that is something that will have to be ongoing.
It
So
will.
hopefully in 5 years, yeah, I'll be really, really very open, spoke about a lot,
Absolutely.
still beating and stuff.
So, Izzy, I'm 54 and you're 10 years younger than me, but we are trailblazers. We are the change makers
Absolutely.
because for my nieces coming up behind me, they're going to know so much more about this. It's going to be talked
Absolutely.
about much more because we did it first.
Yeah.
And I love that. And your whole change maker concept, I love it. And you know what I call my main program? The Menopause Change Maker Pathway.
Oh, brilliant. There you go.
Perfectly aligned because I had been thinking about the word champion and I'd been thinking about labels and all of this. But in actual fact, no, because we are the change makers. And
Yes.
anybody who undertakes training or education are change makers. So don't we align perfectly well?
I absolutely believe that. And I'm so glad to have you over here. And one of the reasons why I was brave enough to ask you is because I read that opinion piece that you had at the Belfast Telegraph. And I believe that you asked a very powerful question. You asked, where is menopause in Northern Ireland's employment's right debate? And I thought, fair enough. And I thought, I just want you to talk to us about, like, why is this question so urgent right now?
This question is so urgent right now because, the time has gone as a for accepting,
Yeah.
accepting. And the fact of the matter is, it is an economic consideration, it's a business consideration, it's a strategic consideration within businesses in Northern Ireland. And I know that it can be seen as like, oh, another thing that we have to do, another thing that we have to consider. But the risk of not considering it is greater than doing something, right? It's not on the business agenda fully yet. We do take a wee bit of guidance from other parts of the globe, or we take ideas and perceptions from other parts of the globe, particularly here in the UK, where the Employment Rights Bill specifically mentions menopause. That's why now it becomes much more important for businesses here in Northern Ireland to start to think, right, okay, where can we do something? And that something does not have to cost tens of thousands of pounds. If it did, I would be worried that businesses would be spending that amount of money on thinking through menopause, putting a policy in place, having some education and awareness training in, putting some information out about menopause, normalizing the conversation, changing the culture. No, no, no. That actually comes from the leadership. And if it doesn't come from leadership, I tell you where it will come from. It'll come from the women who are working in the organization who will start to agitate for change.
Yes.
And doesn't that cause more difficulty than taking a proactive approach to menopause support in your workplace? It makes so much sense. We are in an economic situation where, yes, absolutely, budgets are tight, global shifts, we're affected by everything that's happening globally. And with a very minor adjustment, a minor investment in your workplace, you could actually retain staff who are working hard, they're skilled, they have the knowledge, they have well, their confidence may have dipped. I was going to say they have the confidence. I'm talking about my age, but maybe those in perimenopause might have lost it a wee bit. But with the right support, oh my goodness, what can
Absolutely.
happen?
I love that. And I think it's so well said. I would clap at what you just said, because I think it's really, really empowering and very positive to look at in the future. And it just brings me to think that your work involves breaking stigma and holding space for vulnerability and challenging long standing norms. How do you manage to stay grounded with your work that carries so much emotional weight?
Well, do you know what? Honestly, it's born from personal experience
Mm.
and it's born from professional experience. So I started my first role as a development officer. I was being paid something like £7,000 a year. And then I started to move on towards the role that I eventually had, which was as a chief executive. So professionally, I have always been interested in people. That's
Yeah.
it. Full stop, the end. My realization was we are nobody without our people. That's it, the end. Then my personal experience stepped in and menopause kind of took over. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if I can help one person, that's all I want to do. If I can help 1,000 people, oh my goodness, we're starting to make a bit of impact. If I can help 10,000 people, wow, we are really starting to be the change makers. So I am always very, very consciously aware that I have a role to play here,
Yeah.
that Siobhan, the individual, has a lot of personal experience, a lot of knowledge to bring. And I am always grounded in the reality of the situation that things are changing and we are the change makers. And I don't mean just myself and yourself sitting here today. I mean anybody who engages in a conversation around menopause is making a change. Companies who are embracing menopause support in the workplace are leading a change.
Yeah.
Because you know what? We are at a stage in our lives in menopause where we're not the job for life anymore. We're actually wise enough to look elsewhere if we don't feel that we're getting enough support in our own workplace. Some do like I did, some may do like I did, step out of the normal career trajectory and become, I don't see myself as an entrepreneur, but I became an entrepreneur. I set up my own business as a female in menopause. And so there's something in my mind that says this work is important and I'm doing it.
Absolutely. Love it. And I was wondering, is there any story? You don't have to say any names, but just the essence. Any story that maybe from someone that you've trained or worked with that help you to carry with you on the hard days?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. I was in a workplace. I was planning to go to a workplace, should I say, to deliver a session for female staff only, which I love doing because there's such an energy within the female staff team. Or when women come together, it's like we get it. We can talk about it. We can say things out loud. We might not say if our male colleagues were. But anyway, the day before, I get an email to say, oh, by the way, it's now a mixed gender team. So I'm right, okay. So I'm going to have to like tailor my presentation. Tip, 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 tip. So I goes into the workplace and there's a row of men sitting around the room that I was in, high vis jackets on, hard hats on. They've just come off the factory floor. So I start to do my presentation, blah, 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 blah. And I do bring a lot of energy and indeed a wee bit of fun, Izzy, because what's menopause without a little bit of fun?
Yeah.
And I was conscious that, there were people sitting with their arms folded, but there was one young man and he was sitting with his head down. And I thought, oh, bless, he has been told to come here. He has been told he has to go. And I thought he was asleep, to be quite honest with you. So I was ending the presentation and I was talking about treatment options and I mentioned the word HRT. And next thing I could see the head going up. And I said, now, before I go today, if there's anything that you want to ask, don't let me leave the room without asking the question. The hand went up and I was like, yes, so what's your question? Siobhan, could you tell me what the side effects of HRT are? And I was like,
Wow.
wow. Wow. So there was somebody in his life who
Yeah.
was in menopause who had
It's
been experiencing, maybe thinking or talking about HRT, maybe on HRT, maybe were experiencing side effects. And I just thought, isn't that the most amazing question? Coming from a young man who looked as if he was asleep for the entire duration of the workshop and he was listening the whole time. And so when I think about that, it just raises my spirits. And I think, even if people appear not to be too engaged, they are taking it in. Other stories about people who are say, when I'm, and this come back way to the start, as if when I was doing my first round of presentations, come back 8 years ago. And I was doing a mixed gender workshop. And again, you have some really nice questions and some, thanks a million. But there was one man who said, "Oh my goodness, Siobhan," he said, "Now I understand what my wife is experiencing." I could see changes. I could feel changes. There were changes in the relationship. I could sense that there was something that was happening, but it wasn't being talked about. And my wife was going out to work every day and she was experiencing loss of confidence and changes in weight and changes in body shape and all of these things. He says, "I can now go home and say to my wife, I had a woman into our office today." And I always encourage, say, "We had a workshop today. There was this woman in and she was talking about menopause and she was talking about all this, not all of the symptoms, but some of the symptoms. Oh my goodness, it was so interesting. Great conversation starter in the home." And I was thinking, isn't that brilliant that I'm here in a workplace and that's gone home with that man this evening? Because he's going to have that conversation with his wife. Oh my goodness. Talk about relationships and menopause and how they can be adversely impacted. That is just such encouragement to me. I predominantly work in workplaces, but this has an impact across families,
Absolutely.
relationships, all of that, and I just love it.
It's so interesting and so inspiring because, as you said, you can see how your work goes as cascading in other areas of people's lives. So it's so powerful. And I love that. And, I would like to ask a specific question. If every single listener took an action today after this conversation, what do you want it to be?
Use the word menopause in your home. Use the word menopause in the workplace. Do not be afraid of it,
Yeah.
right? So there's something, listen, I tell the story about my relationship with my partner, which during my menopause, I didn't know what was happening. Perimenopause, I didn't understand. And we didn't live together at the time. And I say, that was probably a good thing because I'm not sure if our relationship would have survived my menopause and lack of understanding. The changes in my behavior, the changes in my mood, I don't think it would have survived living together. Now, the beautiful thing is we bought a house together 2 years ago. I couldn't have done that 7 years ago. So be open to the conversation.
Yeah.
If you're living with somebody who is experiencing menopause, you know, I don't think women need sympathy around menopause. They need empathy and understanding. They need the courage to have conversations. They need the support to say that, "Do you know what? Regardless of what you're experiencing, I am here."
Yeah.
And for women who are experiencing menopause to say, "This is what I'm experiencing. This is what's happening. You may have noticed some changes. This is what's happened to me." And it's a lovely thing I see sometimes on social media where, there are men and women in having conversations about menopause. And it's like that depth of understanding that comes from conversation is just
Yeah.
amazing. So start the conversation, say something, and then do something.
I love it. It's so powerful. And I'm so happy. Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you so much for this conversation and for the work you're doing to push menopause into the mainstream organizational culture and the leadership and the empowering rights. I really like the way you are bringing this conversation to shape our future. And it's very powerful and it's necessary and it's long overdue. And so
I agree.
I think you're doing fantastic. So thank you so much for that work. And to everyone listening today, if today's episode resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That is how movements grow. One voice, one story, one conversation at a time. I'm Izchel Boyd, and this has been Conversations with Agents of Change. And thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you at the next episode. This podcast is produced by the Change Impact Group.